So a lot of people want to know kind of what my pattern is, what the rhythm is for message development, and how is it that you work ahead of time. And just for years and years and years, I graduated seminary in 1990, and I brought with me to the very first church I served, brought with me like 5 sermons that were already ready. And so I've always been about a month ahead in rhythm in terms of preparation. These days I'm 2 to 2.5 months ahead in preparing messages. And that really allows our team here at the church to put in creative elements that they need to help support a sermon or a sermon series. And it allows me not to ever get any ulcers, because I never get to the middle of a week or even the beginning of a week and I'm like, what am I going to preach on? What am I going to preach on? No, that's been established and been decided for a long time ago. And it's only very rarely that I've had to interrupt because of some crisis and preach something sort of off the cuff. And by working that far ahead, and maybe you'll be able to get 3 weeks ahead or 6 weeks ahead, but by working that far ahead, I just have discovered I'm almost never anxious about sermon development. I feel really good when one's done, but I don't feel pressured or burdened. Sunday is always coming, but not in the same way that I hear a lot of my colleagues speak about it, because their preparation patterns and cycles are different. How do you build in rest? And a couple of ways that I build in rest to my sermon preparation in particular. I will, for example, in a couple of months, one of our staffers here at Good Shepherd, he's going to have a whole series, giving him 3 straight weeks to do a series on the book of James. Well, I don't use those 3 weeks as vacation time. I use those 3 weeks. I'm still going to be working on messages that I will deliver in the future. And so by not taking a week off of sermon preparation, even if I am taking a week off of sermon delivery, that helps me rest easier, helps me stay ahead. Now, as for the particular question about rest and Sabbath and self-care, which actually in some ways I think has turned into an idol in church circles these days. We're so worried about self-care sometimes we don't think about congregation care. So my own pattern has been that Fridays are my day off, but I always do a tiny bit of work. I'm always at least thinking about a sermon a little bit on Friday. And for me, resting, taking a day off is not sitting. I always work out on my day off, and I always read something of significance on my day off, and I always just enjoy being in the community even on my day off. And so I guess I would say I'm not a legalist about Sabbath, and that is a pattern that has worked pretty well for me. One other item that I found very helpful in the rhythm of sermon prep and sermon delivery, and again, I'm not a legalist about this, but I do kind of follow it as much as I can, is that I try and couple series where one series might be horizontal, focused on relationships. Like I had one called It Runs in the Family. And that was all about, well, what is it that runs in the family? And sometimes it's things like a lack of forgiveness. And sometimes it's really good things like resilience. But we looked at what runs in the family. So I do try to alternate series that are horizontal, relationship-oriented. Like not long ago, I had a series called Walking on Eggshells. And it was all about David and Saul and their toxic relationship and how trying to deal with Saul's craziness, his descent into madness, made David always one of those people who walked on eggshells. And how many applications were there for that for people's lives? So that was very much a horizontal series. And yet I followed it up with another series called Who's Your One, which was all about evangelism. It was a vertical series that we have a story to tell. You have someone you need to tell it to, and that story is rooted in the goodness of God poured out on your life. So I just invite you, as you plan out your preaching, Don't do them all vertical. Don't do them all horizontal. Try and have a good mix of those two. And while you're at it, you might want to have a good mix of Old Testament-based series and New Testament-based ones as well. And so you may even be wondering, well, what about like a long-term preaching plan for a year? And I tend to do that. I tend to know where I'm going, certainly over the next 6 months and possibly over the next 12 months. And of course, they're built around Easter and Christmas because those come every year and they don't really change very much. I tend in my January series for years and years and years, I tried to do what some in the Methodist world called fishing expeditions, do series that are kind of general interest, maybe really tailored to the skeptic. I began 1 year of preaching with a series called Constant Contact. How can you stay in constant contact with God? It was a series on prayer and devotional life. All of these things, as these particular kinds of series, as you may be able to tell, they've really fit in well with the whole reading prompt notion, the whole idea of starting the day in the Word and not in the world. Other calendar notions that I try to follow, I do try to follow an Easter Sunday with a series that will be kind of relationally focused, that someone who comes to check out your church on Easter and then they find out that following Easter you're doing a series on marriage or on family or on relationships, they'll be, I'm coming back next week because I want to see about walking on eggshells. And we do always on that Easter Sunday, we at the very end of everything, well, we're open again next week. And here's what we're talking about. And we'll show a video clip about that upcoming series. One other way that I try to arrange our calendar at Good Shepherd Church, our mission is inviting all people into a living relationship with Jesus Christ, a living relationship with Jesus Christ. And we've spelled out, well, what's involved in a living relationship with Jesus Christ? And there are 7 things that we call marks or measures, and there are things like saved by grace and filled with the Spirit and on and on. And so my series all try to reinforce one of those measures that the church has already determined is part of a living relationship with Jesus Christ. The advantage of that is that it gives me a lot of discipline and focus in how I'm going to preach. I don't jump from one random topic of interest to another. The energy is harnessed and hopefully we're going somewhere.